Hi, good morning, everybody. I am Ryan O'Boyle. Although lots of different things out there like to take a different spin on my last name, so that's not a mistake. But I get things in the mail, I get things in email, I get websites. It was inevitable, I think, that I encounter application security someday with this name. But so a little about me. I've been in this field for almost 20 years. Initially, I was a pen tester working at Fidelity Investments, where we started up an internal pen testing team totally focused on application security. And also being part of an internal team meant that we focused on not just finding issues in our pen tests, but also working closely with the development teams to make sure that they fixed stuff. Then from there, I moved on to the research team at Veracode, where initially I was doing sort of product-focused research, but then over time transitioned into my current role where I oversee our own internal product security. So again, it's not just about finding security issues, but working with all of our development teams to fix those issues. And this picture is one time I was walking down the street and a bird just landed on me, which I thought was pretty awesome. So that's my picture. But so what we're here to talk about today is how to build a security champions program. This is something that we laid the groundwork for at Veracode going back about 5 years, and have built it up over time and learned a lot of lessons from that experience. And the reason we were looking into a security champions program was that we had the same problem that I think a lot of folks do, which is challenges with scaling our product security function against a development world that was changing. So our development organization was growing and they're switching to new methodologies. That meant they were shipping things faster, that they were releasing more frequently, and that meant security needed to find a way to keep pace with that. Going back to 2015, the App Dev Priorities Survey from Information Week said that 69% of organizations were using some sort of agile methodology. 13% were planning to within 12 to 24 months. So overall, that was the direction. Things are moving faster, and if security can't find ways to scale and to keep up with all of the development that's happening and all the product that's getting released, security can fall behind on those product lines. And then there's the exposure of shipping vulnerabilities more frequently, just like you're shipping functionality more frequently. So in addition to all of the other tools and processes that we've implemented to try to go after that problem at Veracode, one of the critical pieces has been building this partnership between product security and the development organization in the form of a security champions guild. And that relationship has been a win-win relationship for both sides, where we get the scaling we need and they get some tangible benefits as well. And so today I'm going to talk about what we've built, some lessons, some things that we did right the first time, and some things that I wish I had someone to tell me to do it this way at the time. So I ask you to hear a bit about what we've done and how I've somewhat generalized this, and try to interpret it to how you could apply it to your organization and to the culture at your organization. Because I think this is one of those things that really does take that customization to succeed. And then as a result, you'll be able to build a similar program and reap these rewards of shipping secure software more frequently, not just shipping more frequently. So what is a security champion? There's a lot of definitions out there, and I think some of the most frequent ones you'll see go part of the way of what I view a security champion as. So my definition is a product team member responsible for ensuring security is incorporated into the team's products and processes. So that's pretty general, and a lot of the definitions you'll see will say that the focus is about interfacing with security teams, and I think that's part of it, but I think that doesn't go far enough. I think that actual taking some amount of ownership and some responsibility is also an achievable part of the security champion role. If nothing else, the way I sort of summarize this is that you want the security champion or security champions to be the security conscience of the team. So that's the fundamental thing, is for someone just to be a part of that team that's going to make sure security comes up, to be that little voice in the back of the team's collective head saying, oh, what about security? We attempt to have at least 2 on every product team so that we have some natural redundancy built in. Things do vary from time to time, but generally the range is around 1 to 3, with 2 being the ideal. And we bring them through sort of a phased process where initially it is kind of just about being an interface to the security team, but as time goes on and as they have more training and more exposure, they can take on some more responsibilities. The role is also intended to fit in completely with existing development-driven processes. We don't ask for the security champions to come in and dictate a bunch of development processes that security chooses. We want them to still work within whatever process they're working in. So if they're on a team that's doing Agile, great, we're gonna try to find a way to make this work with that. If they're from a team that's not doing Agile, that's doing Waterfall or Scrumfall or Kanban or something else out there, we're gonna have them find a way to adapt it to what their team is doing and advocate for security in the process that they're already using. Another important point is that it's not a replacement for security, whether that be product security or any other type of security group that's working with them. They're just intended to be sort of a first level support within the team so that the team can accomplish some things without having to rely on those centralized groups that are probably overwhelmed with the number of teams working on stuff. And they're also not just an individual security champion, but part of the guild, meaning that there's a support in place for them to work together and share common problems and share common solutions, as well as working with the security team. So to get things started with a program like this, there's a couple things that, some things that we did to seed the program initially. Some of it we were doing not so much with the intention of starting a security champions program. Some of it was just our culture. But when we decided we were going to try this, we set out to identify some specific groups that we knew would need to buy in for this type of program to be successful, and that there were certain things that each of these groups would have to commit to make sure this was going to work. So the first group was security. That was pretty easy buy-in because it was our idea. If you're doing something like this, again, hopefully you're seeing the value and you'll be bought in, but that's not enough to just want to do this. You've also got to make the commitment to possibly make some changes to the way you run some aspects of your security program. And the two that we in particular highlighted were integration and fast implementation. So when I say integration, I mean that as a security team, you're going to have to adopt the processes and the tools that the development organization is using and that they've chosen. And you're also going to have to change when they change. This was something that we've dealt with even on our scale, where the development team may decide that they're going to change from to start using Scrum, and then a year later decide Scrum's too heavyweight, so they're going to change their process to Scrumban. And whatever changes they're deciding to make because of how it benefits them in running their process, we have to find a way to adapt. So we have to define things that are flexible enough to work with whatever process or whatever tools they're going to be using. And then hand in hand with that is moving fast. So speed is important. That's the focus of development today, is on shipping things more frequently, which doesn't meet the old security model of annual reviews of stuff or annual pen tests. So that means you've got to find ways to move faster, which means incorporating into those processes they're using. But I think it also means sometimes that's you as the security person getting out of the way as much as possible. This doesn't mean, calling it quits and saying, all right, security is not a part of this anymore. It just means finding the places that are most valuable for you to be directly in line and possibly blocking the process versus places where you can find tooling or standards that the teams, with the help of their security champion, can rely on and do it themselves. So maybe you don't need to be involved early in the development process because the security champion will be, and you're still the check towards the end of the process. Then from development, the two things we asked there are, one, accepting security as part of the process. So with this sort of trade-off of security trying to get out of the way and help them move faster, that doesn't mean that security can be forgotten. It doesn't mean that development can say, oh yeah, we'll totally do this and then not do it. They have to take some ownership of security the same way that as things have changed over time, they take control over, they take ownership over the functionality of their software and the performance of their software and all these other things that we can call quality. Security needs to be part of that too, and they have to commit to adhering to that. And then holding themselves to the same standard that you would if you were involved in every part of this. So again, just because security is creating this new program and giving them some more independence doesn't mean the standards change. If you have development guidelines, if you have corporate policies, all of that still applies and the teams will still be held to that. You're just giving them a little more flexibility in terms of how they achieve that and possibly when you evaluate that. And then the third group is management of different types. So this could be people managers, or this could be project managers. Depends on what your organization looks like. But the two commitments here are the people and the goals. So if you're going to ask some folks in your organization to be security champions, they're going to have a commitment to do the things that involves, which again, we're trying to find a way to do this within all of development's existing processes. So we're not making a big ask for weeks and weeks of extra work or something, but we do need to make sure that there's a commitment that they're going to be able to spend the time that they need to actually come up to speed on security so that they can perform this role adequately. And then second, for the goals, if the goals aren't treated the same as other goals would be, things will flounder. So how your organization sets goals will be a big factor here, whether it's on the individual level for the security champions, or if we're talking about the goals for a product. So like at Veracode, we're now using a process called SAFE, where every team has certain goals on a regular cadence, and we make sure that security champion and product security goals are a part of that process, just like every other feature commit or anything else we're looking at. So then those same goals also are going to be shared goals at that point between security, who's probably setting some of the direction for what the security champions will work on, and development with their commitment to support that and prioritize that and make sure that this is happening. The next set of things, these are things that we were doing largely at Veracode, not specifically to start off a security champions program, but just because of sort of the culture that we had and our roots. But if you don't already have a strong sort of culture of advocating for security and making it something that is accessible and maybe fun for development, I would encourage you to do that before you try to actually kick off a security champions program. So at Veracode, we had a lot of lunch and learn sessions. So we had a recurring thing where it would be monthly or twice a month, and we'd have some sort of lunch and learn where we did get like pizza ordered or something and have someone come present about some topic that they were familiar with. So we had people talk about typography, and we had people talk about Burning Man, we had people talk about technical topics as well. And security would sometimes be a part of that, but as we knew we were going to launch this program, we made it a point to get folks from like our security research team to present and just share some of what was going on in the security world with a larger group within our organization to help drum up some interest in security as a topic. Second, post-conference summaries. So different people throughout the organization would be going to security conferences throughout the year. Folks from our research team would be going out to like Black Hat and DEF CON and ShmooCon and lots of different conferences. Developers would go sometimes on their own, or sometimes as part of their training, just because of what we do. And we would organize a session after those for people to come back and just share a little bit about what they had seen at the conference. So like in the summer after the big Vegas conferences, we would reserve a room for like an hour and we'd have people sign up and we'd take a look at how many people we had and we'd allocate, around 2 minutes per person to just give a real quick headline version of what the talk was and provide some information to go further. And this was open to all of development, just like the Lunch and Learns. It was open to everyone so they can come in and hear about what was happening in security and learn about where to go to see some more depth about it. And then third, and the one that's probably still our most successful, is having regular capture the flag or CTF sessions. This started off because a group of folks got hooked on. There was a challenge released online called the Hacky Easter puzzle sort of CTF challenge a few years back, and we had a whole group try it out. A lot of folks who hadn't done any sort of like CTF stuff before, so this was a good one because it was technical but not exploitation for everything. There was a lot of sort of puzzle, just sort of technological puzzle types of challenges. And we had a lot of folks from development get hooked on it. And so we set a weekly meeting sort of towards the end of the day. So we did it from like 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock on Tuesdays. And so that meant if people couldn't come right at 5, if it was they had to kind of do this after hours in some sense for their team, they could come from 5 to 6. But everyone would get together in the cafeteria and work on these puzzles together. And it became such a successful thing that we kept it going even after that challenge was over. We had something like at least 10, I think, developers finish the entire puzzle set during the time it was open. And then from there, we made it a recurring thing where every week, now we do it around lunchtime. We still do like a 2-hour slot right around lunchtime once a week so that people have some flexibility. But they come in and they work on whatever they want. We have sort of a loose curriculum for people that are totally new to it, where we use like Over the Wire has some just open CTF challenges that are focused on particular topics like web security or Linux security or crypto. And that's something that we keep going, and new people come in as other people sort of tap out for a while. And it's been a really successful way of getting new developers who might have a little bit of an interest in security or didn't even know they would. They come in and they start to learn a little bit about, so I keep hearing about how I'm supposed to protect against like cross-site scripting and SQL injection and all these other things. This gives them a chance to actually go through that at their own pace and see the progress they're making and understand the defense better, because now they understand what the attack actually is. So as a result of going through all of these, hopefully you'll get some ideas or some of these or other ideas that you may have something you could incorporate security advocacy into your current organization that'll help you find some candidates. So before starting off the program, you're gonna have to have some folks volunteering to be security champions. So that means you've got to find the right people in the organization. Hopefully through doing stuff like a CTF session or these lunch and learns, you'll have some ideas of folks that have come to those and have started to express an interest, and those will be really good candidates. Like I said, the CTF sessions have, for me, been the #1 sort of recruitment method there. People come in, they start doing that, and then as they get more involved, they become a natural fit for being the security champion on their team if there's an opening there. But you'll also find from talking to those different groups that we need buy-in from, you'll also find that they probably have some ideas. There may be someone on a team who's already doing a lot of this stuff and advocating for security, but maybe they're just sort of doing it a little bit more in a vacuum and not as connected in. Or maybe you know them already and they're doing some of this stuff and working with you closely. So again, they'll just be a natural fit. But from all these possible sources, I think volunteers are best. We've had volunteers and we've had what we sometimes call voluntolds, which is the manager has sort of nominated them. And we've definitely seen the most engagement from people that are doing this because they genuinely find it interesting and because they want to be a part of security. So I definitely recommend volunteers whenever possible. Some of the qualities around what makes a good security champion. So we specifically look for people that have some sort of influential role on the team. So that can be something like they're a trailblazer on the team, meaning they're one of the team members who really sort of pushes the boundaries in terms, whether that's in terms of the technology that the team is using or the processes. Someone who's pushing to say, oh, this Scrum process is even too heavyweight. Can we do something a little bit different? How can we restructure things to work better? Folks that, I used to say that the people who were talking about Docker back before anybody else knew what that was and thought Dockers was just like a pair of pants or something. But the people who are looking for what's next and looking for how to change things and improve the way the team works are going to be influential in some way that can be advantageous if you're asking them to advocate for security. Other ways that someone might be influential, again, is really going to depend on your culture and on the team. But it could be that they're really just they have some seniority. Like there's someone who's been working on this product forever, and they sort of set the standards for how things go with it, and that would be a great person to have involved. It could be skill-based in that there may be someone who has a background that really closely aligns, like maybe they were a security person, but they've moved into development. It could be any sort of set of skills there. And related to skills, we also don't limit this to any particular role. So for us, security champions can be a developer, they can be someone who's primarily a tester, they can be someone who's focused on like build and release engineering, which really serves us well when we have different tasks across all of the security champions going after different problems. If it's primarily a development issue, well, then we have all of our development experts weigh in and share how they come up with a solution. If it's something more related to how do we integrate this security tool into our pipeline, then it's great to have someone with release engineering skills and familiarity with the tools we're using to build our software. So we don't limit it based on role. We encourage that diversity actually, so that different problems have different groups of folks that can help solve it. A couple things that we specifically try to avoid though are we set like a 90-day waiting period from the time when someone joins the company, or if someone has just switched to like a new team or a new product that they're working on, because we don't want to overload someone who's ramping up on their sort of day-to-day. So if someone's new to the company, that means they're learning the culture, they're learning whatever product it is they're working on, they're focused on a lot of things, and they're probably also not going to be that influential while they're getting going. So we may work with a team that we know has this gap and we want to introduce a security champion, and we may even sort of earmark someone that they know is coming in to say, oh, they would be a great security champion, but we're going to let them get up to speed first. We're going to let them get to the point where they're really performing on the team, and then we'll bring them into this and give them some new stuff to ramp up on and be involved in the program. And then similarly, again, just trying to avoid people being overloaded. We avoid having security champions that are filling other roles on the team, such as a scrum master or a member of another guild. Like we really only have one other guild that's fully staffed, which is our UX guild. But we try to avoid someone being tapped for too many of those roles, or if they're working as a team lead, which sometimes those may make them influential, but again, we don't want to overload them. We don't want their day-to-day responsibilities with this other role to overwhelm the time and the effort that they could be doing for achieving our security goals. So suppose you've got buy-in from these different groups, you've got a group of like volunteers that are going to be your security champions, but now you're going to have to start thinking about what are you actually going to have them do. So I'm willing to bet that if you're working in security, you probably have some ideas of things that the development teams you work with could improve in terms of their security processes. Maybe they've got a bunch of security debt that you know about and that really needs to get dealt with, or maybe you're just looking for a more efficient way to be involved in ongoing development, or maybe you've got new tools that you want to ask them to use. Whatever those goals are that you have in mind for how you can improve the security of your products, try to categorize them into two buckets. The first being things that are more about having someone from the team work with you to follow a process that you've already set, or to implement a tool that you think would be helpful, or maybe they're already supposed to be doing but hasn't been well adopted. But something that doesn't ask the security champion to be a security expert, but something where they can just partner with you to accomplish this. And then the second bucket are those things where they might be a little bit more self-sufficient. So the example that I use for our history at Veracode was around code reviews. So yes, like we're a security tool company, but we also do manual reviews of things too. And we put a lot of effort actually into defining a process for doing security code review as part of our agile process, where a security review is part of the criteria for closing a story out during the sprint if it's been selected as a security review. And so it's important for us, and it's also extremely overwhelming for a very small product security team to try to keep pace with that and to close those reviews out on a week-by-week basis to keep pace with the development teams. So our first sort of bucket there of asking security champions to be involved in that without needing to be experts was just about them understanding when do they need to ask for a security review and following the process that we have for that. And then the secondary bucket is about them taking a little bit more involvement in those reviews. And so I'd say to group them into these two sorts of buckets, because I view security champions in their development as kind of having two phases. And so the first phase is the one where they really are just that conscience for the team, and the focus is just sort of on asking that question of, when do we need security? So as long as they're in their existing meetings with the team and they're asking that question, have we thought about, are there security implications for this story? And answering that question. And if they can't answer that question, at least raising it so that it can be escalated and they can talk to security. So at this phase, they're still going to need a lot of nurturing. They're just dipping their toes into security, and we're not expecting them to take a lot of ownership for these things, just to follow some process. So to use the code review example, at this point, we'll be asking them to have some means of identifying which stories need a security code review. For us, we did this by working with all the security champions in that sort of first batch that we brought in, and we asked them to take a look at past security findings. So stuff that the security team had found in their product in the past, and find some of the patterns there and write them up in something that we called a grooming guideline. So this now meant that we gave them a template to sort of start from that just identified certain things like, if this story involves any sort of crypto anything, it needs a security review. But then we looked with them at their past findings to say, okay, so this story, it might not have anything that's really as obvious as like, oh, there's crypto code here. It might have just been like, oh, we added a new API, but maybe they forgot to put proper access controls on that API. So we captured that as part of their grooming guideline to say, okay, anytime we're adding a new API, it means there has to be a security control around access control, and that means it's a candidate for a security review. And so this document for each team became something that anybody from the team could look at and evaluate their story and determine, does this meet the criteria for getting a security review? So the security champion, again, worked closely with us to define what this stuff was, and didn't need to be a security expert. So this was something that pretty much anybody from the team who was interested would have been able to go through this process and participate. From there, we moved on from like just having those grooming guidelines to making things even more repeatable. We now have like a sort of online wizard interface that teams can use to follow our process for determining if something needs a security code review, and now even which level of security code review. And we found, once we had this group together, that we would inevitably find uses for this particular group of people, even beyond these sort of goals that we were setting, because we found that we now had a group of folks that had volunteered to participate in the security of their product and knew their product well. So when we started to implement a product security incident response team to deal with high severity disclosures or just high publicity disclosures that we needed to be able to react to and understand our exposure. This was in the days before things like automated SCA, but the security champions became a natural fit for, okay, we have an urgent issue. We need to know which product lines are affected. We could very quickly send this request out to them and have them report back in and say, oh yes, preferably, oh no, we're not using this product at all, we're okay. Or yes, we are using this product. And then we could work with them to figure out if there actually was some exposure. So there was no shortage of things we found to do with this group once we had that ball rolling, including all of these types of things that didn't actually involve them to be security experts. But as we move on from that phase, and this I think is where the real payoff from a security champions program can happen, or whether they start to bear fruit, right? Is when you can get into like a phase 2 type of goal with them. So for us, to use the security code review example again, this, even with having this process that helped. So now we had all of these security champions helping their teams identify which stories needed a security review. If anything, that increased the volume of security reviews our very small product security team had to deal with, which could be very problematic because we were definitely a bottleneck. We were an externality to the team, but we were a part of their requirements to actually say their story's done. So this was always a very sort of tense topic. Things would go well for a while, and then inevitably one team would have a huge spike in their output, and we would struggle to keep up, and we would become a blocker, and that would get escalated because it would be a problem. So we looked at that as something that we really thought we could find a way through the Security Champions Guild to ease some of the tension there, and in a way that let them take a little bit more ownership around the process. So what we did was identify a 2-tiered process for security reviews, where there's still some reviews that have to go to product security. But before that, they have to go through a security champion review. And then there's some stories that just have to have a security champion review. And we knew that if we were going to go after this approach, this meant definitely transitioning from a security champion who just knows how to interface with a security team to one that actually has learned enough about security and specifically code review to do this. Our first attempt at it totally failed. We came up with an approach that was sort of very mentor driven, like what we had done with the grooming guidelines, and started going down that process and realized someone could go through this whole process, do everything we asked of them, and never find a security bug, which seems like a pretty bad way to get someone ready to look at code and find security bugs. So again, being very in the spirit of trying to be agile, we failed as quick as possible on that when we saw that wasn't going to happen, and tried to figure out, okay, how we iterated and said, how can we do this in a way that's actually going to be successful? So it took a little bit more time from the security team to build a program that would make them successful in doing this, but we did. So we came up with three activities that we asked the security champions to do before they could take on these code reviews. So we asked them to do like some online e-learning about sort of fundamentals of web AppSec. And then second, we had them sit and participate in a 2-day training course given by product security, where we talked again about some sort of fundamental security concepts like confidentiality, integrity, availability, and stuff that we take for granted because we hear it all the time, but they maybe don't hear about it in that context. As well as some of just the concepts of like, you know, trust zones, trust boundaries, and whitelists versus blacklists, and positive versus negative security models. A lot of those fundamental concepts that we understand, but that don't make it to the developers. We do half a morning focused on that. Then we start moving into specific controls like data validation, logging, error handling, encoding, and SQL parameterization. And then we do, on the second day, some threat modeling exercises based on what they've gone through already. And those particular controls that we talk about with them are the same ones that we expect them to look for in security reviews. So again, we ask them to do this within the context of what they're already doing, because teams are already doing peer code review. And then we chose some security topics that we thought were realistic for this group of folks to look for. So there's nothing too advanced here. It's things like, are you logging stuff, and are you logging stuff that you shouldn't be? And it's not that complicated. It's stuff that they're already looking at, or just adding a few things for what they should look at as well. And then the third part is, again, since our first take on this didn't give them enough opportunity to actually find bugs, we put together some exercises where they can actually find bugs. So we went through some old findings we had, and we sort of abstracted them and made them a little bit less product specific. And we actually spin up, once they've gone through that training, they can schedule the time, and I spin up an environment for them that has all these merge requests in the same tool that they would normally be looking at their merge requests in. And I ask them to go in and do a peer review on it, including applying the security stuff that they've done in the past couple of days. And they go through and they look for the bugs, and they know there's bugs in there, but they do a really good job of finding them. And then we get together afterwards and have a one-on-one conversation where they explain what their process was, what they found. And it's been a much more successful way of introducing them to that process. And if they complete all of these things, and based on the conversation, if they feel confident that they could do this, and I get a strong sense, or someone else from product security gets a strong sense that they're ready, then we'll actually add them to the list of certified code reviewers. And now they're very much in that sort of phase 2 of being a security champion, where they can actually take on a little bit more responsibility and make product security less of a bottleneck for their team. An important point there, though, it is to have a lot of clarity around the scope of something like that, because obviously this could be a recipe for disaster, right? If we just told them, okay, you guys are good to do your own code reviews, go, and we didn't still have that some concrete ways for them to know exactly which code reviews they should be taking on themselves and which ones they shouldn't, then that could be a real problem. So that's why we still ask them to follow the same process that they were before, so that we still maintain visibility into the fact that code reviews are happening or not happening if they're not, and then we can detect that and deal with it. So then 4 things that we do to sort of help sustain the program are: 1, reward the security champions. So you're asking them to take on some more responsibility. You're asking them to do even more in their current role and in everything that their team is already doing. So there should be something in it for them, besides just the fact that they might want to. So some things are just the access they get to the security team or the security teams can be really interesting for them, especially if they are interested in this. We find that we have people come in who are really just excited to be able to work with our team and to learn more about this. They're also getting some really valuable experience. It's kind of a resume builder to say, not just I'm a developer, but I'm a developer who's also had some specialization in security because it's such an important topic. We give them access to extra training that they wouldn't have just on their team. So every team has a certain allocation of training budget, but we have a dedicated security champions training budget. So that means security champions just have to get the approval from their team to be unavailable for whatever duration it is for the training they're going on, but the team doesn't have to make any financial commitment. So we've sent people to, big groups of security champions to local conferences near us. We've sent folks out to bigger conferences like Black Hat and DEF CON, and we can do that all without asking the development teams to pay for it. The CTF sessions, so that sort of like learning to hack and being involved in that way and seeing that other side of it, it can be really interesting. It also can just be fun, and that's something that they get value from. And then stickers, badges, shirts, whatever really works in your culture for some sort of like recognition of this is someone who's done something special or fulfills a special role. So like, we have a lot of stickers around the office, and we do different runs of these like 0-1 stickers, and we have like a special one that only security champions get. So, and then second, staying in touch. So this really is about working with these team members as well as creating sort of a community across all of them. So however your development teams are staying in touch, like if they're using Slack or HipChat or some other messaging service, make sure there's like a channel, or maybe IRC, make sure there's a channel for security champions. We do this, and we make sure all the security champions are in there as a means of communication, and inevitably people also stumble upon it and want to pay attention, and that also can be a recruitment technique eventually. But it's a place for them to share notes and to connect with each other in addition to connecting with the security team. We also do guild meetings. We used to do them monthly. As the program's kind of matured, we tend to do it more quarterly now to make sure that we really have enough stuff to talk about. But we use those meetings to get together and see how things are going with the different teams. Are there problems that they're encountering? As we have like quarterly goals for the programs, that becomes our venue for sharing notes about what the goal is, and having someone who maybe has already made some progress on that goal share that with everybody else, so that as they start to look at it, they can have a bit of a head start. But all these things are just ways of keeping people connected, both with the security teams as well as each other, so that they're benefiting from the group. An important thing too, since this is kind of a guild and a particular role, when someone changes teams, we ask them to take the role with them. So I know I said before, like, we don't want someone who's ramping up on something new, but we don't want them ramping up on the security side of things and their product. But if you're in the guild and you've been doing this on your product for a while, and then you change teams and are just working on a new product, even if it means maybe now we're going to have like 4 on that product, we know it's only temporary, and having extra ones never hurts. So we'll ask them to keep that role as they move around, because they're still a part of the guild, they're still a part of the program. Monitoring progress. So this one's definitely important, because especially if you're trying to transition some of the responsibility to the teams, how can you in your security role make sure that they are staying true to that commitment from before all of this, that they're going to hold themselves to the same standard, and how can you see that you're actually progressing and achieving the goals that you set for yourselves and for the program. So all of the metrics that you're probably using now about stuff like security findings and all the rest of it, that all still applies, but you can probably do some more stuff as well. So either tracking that's related to a particular goal. So we do this quarter by quarter, like when we do a new security champion goal for everybody, we set up whether it's a Kanban board or it's like a dashboard, depending on what the objective is. So like we had a big push for like closing SCA vulnerabilities when we started using a new tool there. And so we had nice dashboards to check in. For other things, like if we're asking everyone to do some e-learning, we might just have a Kanban board. But one thing that we introduced specifically alongside the Security Champions program was our product security maturity model. So there's some sort of common ones out there like BSIM or OpenSAM, and they have their purpose, but they didn't really map to what we were trying to do with the Security Champions program and how we wanted to measure the impact of the security champions on their teams and their products. So we took this format that, again, learning from our counterparts in development, we already had like a release engineering maturity model in this sort of format where it was just different levels of expertise and some different topics. And we brainstormed what are some of the topics that we want to focus on over the next couple of years and improve how our teams are doing. So that's where we came up with this list. And then we defined sort of beginner level or base level as like they're not really doing anything. And then we defined the expert level as what we thought like an ideal for us, like a DevSecOps team, what would they be doing? And then we tried to map out a progression from doing nothing to that expert level. And we go through this on a regular basis and evaluate the teams on where they are on these different categories. And while this isn't something we change a lot, it can be changed if as we're trying to get to a goal, if we find like, you know what, this really wasn't realistic, we do reserve the right to change it over time. And we also know that this isn't exhaustive for everything that we ever want to do with our security program, but these are the things we wanted to focus on in the short term, and we can add more rows as we need to. There's a lot to figure out in terms of how do you work with the security champions and with their teams to map onto this. And I will say we found it, again, being very limited resources on product security, it can be a little bit overwhelming to try to go through and verify all this stuff. So we're currently looking for ways to streamline this process to make it something we can do more regularly. And then finally, reflect and iterate. As with all things in like the agile world, you've got to look at what you're doing, but periodically, take that time to think about, is it working? Is there a way you could do it better? I gave that example of our first attempt at trying to do code reviews just wasn't going to happen. So we needed to stop that as quick as possible, free up people's time, and then reevaluate how we could do it better. Similarly, if you're using something like that maturity model, you're going to want to reflect on what are the new categories that you want to start focusing on at some point. So if you keep all of these things in mind, and in particular how to sort of customize them and incorporate them into your own culture at your organization, then I think you can find a way to build that partnership between security and development that helps you scale your program and helps them move faster without being as externally reliant on the security team. I think we may have just like a minute or two for a quick question, if anyone has a question.
Thank you. I have a question. Before you mentioned that would be nice if a security champion that is moving from one product team to another team will keep the security champion thing. I mean, role. Now my question is, when it will move, if in the new product in the new product team there will be already a security champion, how will be? I mean, the new upcoming guy will be like assistant security champion, or yeah.
Yeah, so we early on we did sort of identify a primary security champion, and then sort of we called it secondary, but it could also be tertiary, or however many. We over time we haven't enforced that as much. We've kind of left it up to them to divide the work. Typically, we find that the teams don't have a shortage of work to do, so giving them the flexibility of deciding. So based on what it is. So if we've got someone who's been a security champion on that team longer, then if we're talking about a threat modeling session that we want to do with them, they might be better suited to it just because they have the most background. If it's about making some changes in the pipeline to change some security scanning, that's probably something either one of them can do. So we don't specify one as primary anymore, but they sort of self-select who's appropriate for a given task. So I think, do we have time for another question, or should we go offline for questions?
I have a question.
Okay, last question. Yeah.
So, you said you have 2 champions, ideally 3 champions. So again, if someone moves, does it happen that the product manager says like, I have already 2 champions in the team and I don't want the 3rd one, the 4th one? And one more question, how many champions you have, and does it happen that the team is so small that it's only 2 people or only 1 person?
Yeah, so the last question first, like we definitely have some teams that are very small where we may have like 2 local resources who are our security champions, and then they may have an extended team that's where they have like some staff augmentation for development or something. So we have had that situation, and we've had both of them be security champions, which actually is really good because that example of doing like code review, one of our rules is you can't be the security code reviewer of your own code, of course. So even if you're a team of 2 with maybe staff augmentation, it really is beneficial to have both go through that training and be a part of it, because then they can still peer review and they can review the code coming in from the augmentation. We've never had anyone sort of raise it as a problem that they have too many security champions. I think largely that's because we do make it such a point of limiting how much time we ask for. We try to introduce all of this stuff into the existing meetings that they're having. We try to be really respectful of asking for security champion time. So it's only every now and then, we've only ever asked for like a full 2-day chunk of a security champion's time for that internal training once per security champion. And so as long as they have the flexibility not to say, okay, I've got 4 people from my team that are all going to be gone for 2 days, there really hasn't been a problem. So, and inevitably, at least with our organization, people do move around over time. So even if there's 4 on a team today, that may mean that there's enough other development on that. There's enough, that's such a big team that it's still proportional, or it may mean that over time it's going to flatten out anyway as people move around again. So thank you. I will be around if people have further questions. You can meet me in the back of the room, but thanks very much.